Last year, I was walking through a quiet Tokyo neighborhood long after midnight.
Right.
The streets were completely empty, just the hum of vending machines. And then I saw it.
Okay.
A man in a rumpled suit, fast asleep on a public bench. His briefcase was right there beside him, completely untouched. His wallet was visible in his jacket pocket.
Just out in the open?
Totally. And no one was around. I mean, in most of the world, this scene is an invitation for disaster.
Oh, absolutely. A story you'd tell about just incredible luck.
Or staggering foolishness. But here it was just normal, unremarkable. And it left me with this single pressing question. How? How does a society engineer that level of trust?
And the easy answer is always, oh, it's the culture or respect.
But that's not it, is it? The truth is far more calculated and, well, far colder. Japan's legendary safety isn't built on kindness. It's built on a brilliant, invisible prison.
A prison where the walls are made of the people around you and the lock is your own fear of their gaze. That perfectly encapsulates the core tension we're exploring today.
It does.
We're going to try and peel back the surface of that remarkable societal order to analyze the sophisticated system that's running underneath it. A system that trades personal freedom for absolute security.
And that's our mission for this deep dive.
Right.
We're going to get into the unique social and economic mechanics of Japanese society that create this profound, almost miraculous order.
Right.
We'll start by analyzing the cultural determinants of low crime, this concept we're calling the Panopticon of Peers.
Then we have to look at the other side of the coin, the serious psychological costs this homogeneity imposes.
Exactly. And finally, we'll explore how Japan's deliberate cultural isolationism informed its whole approach to economic development and, preserved that legendary artisan spirit.
It's really an inquiry into engineered conformity. We're trying to understand the precise calibration required to achieve not just low crime, but a pervasive nationwide sense of structural trust.
We have to look beyond the platitudes and actually see the societal machine in motion. Okay, so let's start by establishing just how structurally anomalous Japan is when you look at it through the standard lens of criminology. I mean, Western social science has long operated on the assumption that modernization, urbanization, rapid economic growth, all of that is inevitably coupled with social turbulence and, of course, rising crime rates.
Sure. If you look at post-war Europe or North America, those periods of massive structural change, you see the crime statistics just spike consistently.
But Japan, historically, it presents the exact inverse crime paradox.
It really does. It experienced this explosive, unprecedented economic growth, rapid mass urbanization, profound demographic shift. I mean, precisely the conditions you would expect to trigger social breakdown and instability.
Right.
Yet during the 1960s and 70s, crime rates not only failed to rise, but remarkably began this unique, sustained decrease.
Which just completely challenges the universality of classic criminological theories that say structural disruption is the main driver of deviance.
It throws them out the window.
So the standard structural determinants, poverty levels, inequality gaps, unemployment figures, they're relevant, of course, but they aren't enough to explain the Japanese reality.
Not at all.
So if the standard economic and social variables don't fully explain this stability, we have to shift our focus, right? We have to look at culture.
Precisely. And we need to take a macro-sociological perspective on culture here. We have to treat it not just as, a collection of traditions or aesthetics.
Right, not just tea ceremonies and temples.
Exactly. But as a given aggregate that encapsulates individuals from birth to death. It's a comprehensive system of tacit meanings, values, and norms that provides every person with standard navigating principles.
So it's the operating system.
It is. And when you view it that way, culture becomes this powerful, autonomous causal factor in human behavior. It operates independently of, or sometimes even overrides, immediate economic conditions.
And within that cultural operating system, Japan's profound collectivism is what's interpreted as this fiercely powerful crime preventive characteristic.
Absolutely. The mechanism for this prevention is omnipresence. It's why we're calling it the Panopticon of Peers.
We love that phrase.
The concept is rooted in the observations of the sociologist Chi Nakan back in 1970. She characterized Japan as fundamentally a vertical, group-oriented society. The entire social structure is engineered to ensure that the individual is very rarely, if ever, left alone.
Out of sight.
Or outside the regulatory and controlling view of a collective unit.
That's a fascinating insight because it suggests the social control is It's decentralized. You don't need a central authority figure watching you, like a police officer or a boss.
Or priest.
Right. Your neighbor, your work colleague, the person next to you on the train, they are all participating in this perpetual collective surveillance team.
That's the key difference. The walls of this prison aren't made of concrete. They are the eyes of everyone around you. And because this collective surveillance is constant, the psychological barrier to committing a crime or even just a small social transgression is significantly higher than in individualistic societies where anonymity gives you a shield.
And this pervasive social observation, it creates the perfect environment for shame culture to function as the ultimate deterrent.
It really does.
If we try to map out the hierarchical value system of Japanese society, the absolute pinnacle, the top value, is the maintenance of harmony within the group.
That's right. This paramount consciousness of harmony dictates an extremely elaborated social etiquette, or reigi.
Yeah.
Consequently, avoiding eccentricity, avoiding actions that draw unwanted attention, it's not a matter of preference. It is a non-negotiable social requirement necessary for the group to function smoothly.
So the most efficient regulator of deviant actions isn't the threat of punishment from the state,
Not physical punishment, no.
but the existential fear of shaming your fellow group members. The society operates based on these pervasive regulative ideas, as Masayuki Ito described them. You're constantly acting under the collective, invisible gaze of sekani, what society, your community, your group thinks of you.
And the contrast with what sociologists call guilt culture, which is common in many Western and Christian societies, it's profound.
How so?
Well, in a guilt culture, the mistake is primarily known to your own conscience, or maybe you confess it to a spiritual authority. Punishment often flows from an external, impersonal legal authority. You can do your time and, potentially re-enter society.
But in Japan, because of the intense social homogeneity and the tight integration of the individual into their work and family units, breaking the rules leads to something far worse than jail.
It leads to immediate and profound social death.
Social death.
Exactly. It results in this collective shame that affects your family, your employer, your social circle.
Yeah.
That social exclusion, being permanently cast out or marginalized by the collective, is a far more devastating and therefore stronger deterrent than any potential fine or short jail sentence.
It's a permanent scar.
It is.
And the mechanism that triggers this exclusion is often tied to the cost of inconvenience, this intense cultural fear of meiwaku. We often treat meiwaku, the act of causing trouble, as just, politeness. But you're arguing it's actually an evolved, deeply serious survival mechanism.
It is absolutely existential. The dread of giving trouble to others is one of the most powerful psychological drivers in the society. If you violate the cultural contract, if you cause meiwaku, you threaten the harmony, the stability, and the efficient operation of the collective unit you belong to.
So if I cause meiwaku by being late or messy, I am not just being rude to one person.
No.
I am undermining the structural integrity of the entire group.
Precisely. And that threat, whether it's real or just perceived, can lead to your collective exclusion. The system punishes disruption not with a minor penalty, but with banishment.
Wow.
This makes self-regulation critical for personal and even economic survival. I mean, think of it this way. In the West, if you drop litter, it's a misdemeanor. In this culture, it's a betrayal of the group's contract, which feels like a direct threat to your social and professional survival.
That completely reframes the entire concept of civility. It moves it from altruism to pure self-preservation.
It does. It requires individuals to internalize the costs of their actions on the collective to such an extent that inconvenience becomes this existential anxiety.
And when a culture is this tight, meaning the norms are just overwhelmingly clear and reliably imposed by everyone around you, you start seeing these deep mechanisms play out in these small, almost invisible actions.
Yeah, these daily rituals that really demonstrate the depth of this cultural contract.
Like surgical masks.
Exactly. Look at the use of surgical masks, a phenomenon that predates the pandemic by decades. For a very long time, the primary driver for wearing a mask wasn't self-protection.
No, it was to protect others.
Right. It was the need to prevent others from being affected if you felt slightly unwell. It is a physical, visible manifestation of other-directedness and group responsibility. You are signaling to the collective, I am managing my risk so I do not impose inconvenience upon you.
Or take a really mundane example, the ritual of entering a shop on a rainy day.
The umbrella.
You will invariably find those little plastic sleeves at the entrance. The reflex is automatic.
Yeah.
You don't take your dripping umbrella into the establishment to contaminate the shop floor.
Yeah.
thereby causing meiwaku for the cleaning staff or future customers. The act of sheathing the umbrella is an involuntary reflex aimed at mitigating the tiniest amount of inconvenience.
And these actions are non-negotiable. You contrast this with the West, where you might see people shaking off an umbrella inside a store or leaving a dirty towel on a gym bench.
Sure.
Those are minor irritations, but they wouldn't trigger a social catastrophe. In Japan, these small breaches are avoided because the social price of deviation, even minor deviation, is just too high.
And what's truly astonishing is how deep this ingrained sense of order goes. It even reaches those on the very margins of society.
Right.
Even the socially distressed, the unhoused population sleeping in tube stations or public parks will display this cultural adherence. They'll carefully wrap and stack their belongings, maintaining a neat, non-intrusive footprint.
It's incredible. This ingrained sense of order persists even when they lack basic shelter or a clear sense of belonging. It just speaks to the persistence of the cultural conditioning that dictates non-intrusion.
We even see it in the language itself. That moment at the airport counter where the staff agent automatically apologizes, "Please excuse us for keeping you waiting, even if there is nobody queuing behind you."
It's a linguistic acknowledgement of potential meiwaku before it even occurs.
A constant reassurance that the system is trying to function without imposing on you.
However, and this is a big however, this high morality, this pervasive self-regulation, it's contingent on underlying social stability. We have a powerful lesson from the period of social breakdown immediately following Japan's defeat in 1945.
That was a time of immense volatility. The societal system was in disarray, traditional social networks were fractured, and there was a desperate lack of basic necessities. And when people lost that basic sense of belonging, when survival became precarious, the tight culture just temporarily disintegrated.
Precisely. When crime appears as the last desperate resort to survival, when your stomach is empty and your social anchor is gone, it overrides any internal morality or external control. This demonstrated the truth in Bertolt Brecht's famous expression, "Erst das Essen, dann die Moral."
First the essential eating, then morality.
The prerequisites for moral control, predictability, safety, and social belonging, they were absent, and crime increased significantly.
So the order isn't inherent, it's a delicate construct. We should maybe rephrase Brecht's observation for this cultural context. Erst das Essen, next die Zugehörigkeit, dann die Moral.
First the eating, then the belonging, and only then can morality hold sway.
Exactly. When that fundamental sense of community or belonging was shattered in the immediate post-war years, morality alone proved insufficient, and the collective contract had to be rebuilt from the ground up.
It proves that the order requires a stable community structure to enforce the cultural norms. It's not magic.
This realization that the order is conditional on a strong, consistent, and cohesive community, it brings us directly to the unavoidable cost of such systemic peace.
The dark side.
The absolute safety, the ability of that businessman to sleep undisturbed on the street, is established by millions of people actively restraining their personal expression.
It's a profound transaction, isn't it? Absolute security purchased at the price of self-suppression. The culture functionally demands that millions castrate their individuality to maintain the delicate consensus and harmony required for the social machine to operate with minimal friction.
And this intense demand for conformity, well, it results in a zero-tolerance policy for deviation.
Yeah. Any deviation. Small variances from the accepted consensus in dress, behavior, lifestyle can easily trigger these disproportionately strong, negative collective reactions. You just cannot risk standing out.
Which is captured perfectly by that enduring proverb, "The nail that sticks out gets hammered down."
Right. Eccentrics, individualists, or those who merely threaten the status quo are systematically pressured back into line, or if they resist, they're collectively excluded.
That psychological hammering is an institutionalized tool of social control.
And it begins early. The cultural message, stick to your group, behave cordially, avoid eccentricity, is relentlessly confirmed and reinforced throughout the entire socialization process.
From the very beginning.
From family, through nursery, primary school, secondary school, and finally, the rigid expectations of the workplace. It is a total, lifelong system of socialization that continually subordinates personal desires and freedom to institutional and group stability.
That sounds intensely draining. It creates a society where conformity isn't a suggestion, it's the air you breathe. And while this produces remarkable stability and low crime, the psychological constraint on the individual, that perpetual self-monitoring, must be immense.
It is. The security of the collective is prioritized over the subjective freedom of the individual. And we see the consequences in various social phenomena where the pressure to conform leads to intense internalized anxiety about failure or standing out.
The individual is never truly free from the gaze of their peers.
Never.
Now, that incredible unifying need for consensus, this drive for social stability, it proved to be an indispensable strategic asset when the nation faced massive disruptive external forces.
Like rapid industrialization.
Exactly, during the Meiji Restoration and the post-war Reconstruction.
This is what we call the centripetal force, the indispensable need for an inward-directed, unifying identity banner. When a nation undergoes total social change, massive economic turmoil, adoption of foreign institutions, this centripetal force is vital to prevent the society from breaking apart.
Breaking apart along political or ethnic or regional lines.
Exactly. Without a shared, unifying national goal, the internal tensions explode under stress. We saw this tragedy unfold in the former Yugoslavia, where ethnic and regional lines of fracture deepened dramatically during periods of economic and political instability.
So the ultimate and frankly brilliant technique to rally a diverse or stressed population is to adopt economic development itself as the unifying identity.
Yes. The state actively fosters the social atmosphere that says, we are all in the same boat pulling toward collective prosperity. That shared national goal of economic catch-up becomes the new, non-negotiable common ground.
It replaces or at least reinforces those older cultural contracts.
And this strategy led directly to the formation of the political system known as authoritarian developmentalism, which characterized successful latecomer economies across East Asia.
Japan, South Korea, Taiwan.
All of them. Authoritarian developmentalism is a temporary political regime where the government's legitimacy is derived almost solely from its demonstrated success in delivering rapid, sustained economic growth.
And it required a very specific and highly effective organizational structure.
Namely, an elite, highly competent bureaucracy.
Right.
This bureaucracy, staffed by the nation's best managerial and intellectual talent, was assigned the primary task of efficiently mobilizing human and non-human resources. This elite team was empowered to make crucial long-term economic decisions.
And this system, it accepts or even demands limitations on popular participation in decision-making.
It has to.
Because the goal is efficient resource concentration and mobilization. It prioritized speed and measurable economic results over expensive democratic consultation, especially in the early critical stages of development.
It was a strategic choice made in the face of national survival and the urgent need to catch up to the West. The social contract was essentially trade some political and personal freedom for guaranteed national economic prosperity.
And that trade-off was sustainable, because the underlying cultural homogeneity ensured that when the state decided on a policy like diverting all resources to steel manufacturing, the population would fall in line, seeing it as serving the greater collective good.
That cultural base is what made the authoritarian developmentalism regime uniquely effective compared to attempts in more individualistic or fragmented nations. It just wouldn't work elsewhere.
This national emphasis on internal unity and its deep-seated cultural contract meant that when Japan began adopting Western economic systems, capitalism, market mechanisms, corporate structures, it did so strictly on its own terms.
Right. This internal independent evolution is sometimes referred to as the Galapagos syndrome.
The Galapagos syndrome.
Yeah. And the anthropological concept that most accurately explains this is translative adaptation. The theory posits that when non-Western societies adopt foreign systems, they are not passive recipients. They don't simply scrap their indigenous culture and replace it with the imported model.
So the indigenous base culture remains powerfully active.
It acts as a filter. It selectively reinterprets, modifies, and bends the foreign systems to maintain the underlying continuity of its traditional structure. The borrowed elements are translated into the local idiom.
So the Western market mechanism, which is fundamentally individualistic and just completely foreign to Japan's indigenous collective structure, is merged or translated into the local context.
Exactly. The resulting system, which we can label WO Western elements merged with the original culture, appears fundamentally ambiguous to outside observers.
How so?
On one hand, you have a capitalist society fully equipped with the market principle, modern laws, technology. On the other hand, when you view it through a purely Western universalist lens, the system appears to retain these pre-modern legacies.
Like intense personal loyalty to a company or non-transparent corporate dealings.
Things that seem hopelessly incompatible with modern Western institutions.
And this explains why, even after 130 years of modernization, Japan is still widely regarded by observers in the West as fundamentally different. It retains this dual character, simultaneously modern and profoundly traditional.
It's a result of its unique active adaptation process. They took the machine but rebuilt the engine to run on local fuel.
This internal logic, then, profoundly informed Japan's explicit discomfort with, and ultimately its rejection of, the neoclassical development economics that were championed by institutions like the IMF and the World Bank after the 1960s.
Oh, absolutely. Japanese economists and policymakers felt the methodological scope of the neoclassical view was just far too narrow and simplistic to handle the complex reality of total social change required for national development.
Okay, so let's break down the two contrasting philosophies, because this is where the policy differences really emerge. On one side, you have the neoclassical thinkers who rely on the framework approach.
Right. The framework approach prioritizes macroeconomic stability, currency liberalization, deregulation. The core assumption is that if you establish the ideal, stable, framework-sound monetary policy, low tariffs, limited government interference, the market mechanism will just emerge automatically.
And it will naturally allocate resources optimally.
The government is just an impartial referee establishing the rules of the game. It's a total laissez-faire assumption.
And then the Japanese dissent proposes what they termed the ingredients approach.
And the ingredients approach shifts the focus dramatically. It prioritizes long-term, real sector targets like improving industrial structure, achieving specific growth rates, building technological capacity.
So it's much more hands-on.
It proceeds from the fundamental pragmatic recognition that markets in latecomer developing nations are often severely underdeveloped. They aren't mature, efficient, or widespread, and therefore they require deliberate creation and careful nurturing.
In this model, the government can't afford to be an impartial referee.
No, it has to act as an active coach. The state must actively intervene, not to control everything, but to concentrate limited human and non-human resources in key strategic sectors to ignite economic growth and build capability.
And Japan's own post-war recovery is a prime example of this.
The priority production system of the late 1940s is a perfect case. They deliberately downplayed the free market mechanism initially to concentrate every available resource on the production of steel and coal to rebuild their industrial base.
So the argument is that Western neoclassical policies often fail because they assume a mature market structure already exists, which is just not the case in developing economies.
That's the core of the dissent. We see this brilliantly illustrated in the analysis of Chinese reform since 1978, which attempted liberalization very quickly. Think about the liberalization of Chinese agriculture.
Okay.
When the compulsory state procurement of agricultural products was phased out, the proponents of the framework approach naively expected highly developed markets to just emerge spontaneously and efficiently.
But the ingredients for that market weren't there.
They absolutely were not. Problems immediately arose because the crucial administrative functions previously handled by the collectives managing large-scale irrigation, providing essential seed and financial services, specializing production, they simply evaporated when the collectives were dismantled.
The economic functions were terminated rather than smoothly transferred to new management systems.
Yeah. It's like assuming you can win a Formula One race just by having the fastest car. You're forgetting you need the pit crew, the smooth track, and the refueling system in place first.
The market is the car,
Yeah,
but the ingredients are the necessary institutional infrastructure.
exactly. The market mechanism failed to function as effectively as the proponents of liberalization presumed because the necessary infrastructure, the ingredients, weren't there. The market is not an impersonal deus ex machina operating with clock-like precision. It's a complex institution run by human beings, and it requires time and deliberate state effort to become efficient.
So the state has to take the initiative to marketize the economy, or it will just remain underdeveloped and inefficient.
This brings us to a crucial, often overlooked concept, institutional complementarity. This is the idea that a society's entire web of existing institutions, everything from corporate governance laws and financial contracts to employment customs and fundamental social morals, are profoundly interdependent and mutually reinforcing. They function like gears in a complex clockwork mechanism.
Can you give us a concrete example of this complementarity in action, maybe contrasting Japan with the US.
Certainly. Look at employment structure. In the United States, firms typically value individual qualification, performance measurement, and highly mobile labor. This is complemented by a financial system that prioritizes short-term shareholder value and rapid capital movement.
Okay, but in Japan, the picture is completely different.
Completely. Japanese firms prioritize loyalty, team spirit, long-term attachment to the organization, and seniority-based wages, often leading to the famous system of lifetime employment.
And that system is only sustainable because it's complemented by other institutions.
For example, the banking sector historically relied on the main bank system, where a single large bank held equity in the company and provided long-term patient capital. They understood that returns would be slow and steady, not immediate.
So the bank accepts lower short-term returns because it values the stability provided by a loyal, long-term labor force.
And the company values that loyal labor force because it knows it has patient financial backing. They are locked together.
You can't just swap one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. You couldn't just introduce high individual performance bonuses and layoffs like a Western company without causing instability in the entire interdependent web of relationships. The banking relationship, the corporate governance structure, the moral employment contract, they would all be destabilized instantly.
Which suggests that these existing institutions are history-dependent and incredibly resilient to minor policy shocks. Changing them requires not just a new law, but enormous social energy and cultural upheaval.
And that is the precise conclusion for development policy. The path to a functioning market economy has to be unique to each society because the existing social structure, the culture, the norms, the institutions, is prior and fundamental to the economic system. One-size-fits-all policy packages fail because they ignore this deep cultural groundwork and institutional complementarity.
They treat the economy as a sterile laboratory, ignoring the living, breathing social system that underpins it all.
And this fundamental Japanese refusal to passively accept purely efficient Western models is nowhere clearer than in the concept of the shokunin kishitsu.
The craftsman's spirit.
This goes far beyond mere technical skill. It's a profound moral and emotional philosophy that actively resists global consumerism.
How so?
The shokunin kishitsu is a moral stance, a devotion to one's work as an act of service, humility, and emotional expression. It is a powerful cultural bulwark against the dominant globalized paradigm that demands output scalability, profit maximization, and pure clinical efficiency above all other considerations.
In the globalized world, the question is always, how can I make this faster and cheaper? But the artisan seems to be asking a different question entirely.
They are. The craftsman doesn't strive for efficiency above all, but for harmony. Harmony between the tool they are using, the touch of their hand, the material they are working with, and their own self. They seek perfection through process, not just output.
Give us a deeper dive into that harmony. What does working with the material rather than forcing it actually look like?
Well, take the example of a master woodworking artist. They explain that they don't simply choose a piece of wood to fit a pre-existing geometric design.
Okay.
Instead, they design to suit the wood. They study the piece, each unique grain, the natural cracks, the inherent quirks of the material.
So the wood itself dictates the final form.
To a significant degree, yes. Their role is to work with those irregularities, to bring out the wood's inherent character, rather than fighting it to achieve sterile, quantifiable uniformity.
A global consumerist model demands perfect uniformity so every piece is interchangeable.
But the shokunin accepts the natural flaw as character.
That is a profound philosophical difference. It resists the modern economic logic that dictates that products must be flawless, generic units suitable for mass, global consumption.
And this resistance ensures that the product carries the physical and emotional presence of its maker. It's a refusal to let the cold calculus of pure functionality strip the object of its soul.
And in a sense, this cultural value is protected by the same tight social structure we discussed earlier.
It is. That structure allows the economy to run on localized logic, rather than being swept away by pure foreign competition.
And this philosophical resistance to sterile perfection, it translates directly into architecture and design. It creates an aesthetic that actively seeks emotional resonance by embracing human imperfection.
Right, and these aren't flaws in the sense of errors. They're intentional, inherent aspects that resist that overly polished, mass-produced look.
Modern Western design often demands pure precision, geometric perfection, high functionality.
And while this achieves clarity, the result can often be a product or a space that feels sterile, untouchable, or, as some designers put it, not alive.
So how does the Shokunin Kishitsu integrate the human flaw to achieve character and warmth?
I think the most potent example is found in modernist, high-end concrete architecture, particularly in Japan. Instead of achieving a perfectly smooth, uniform concrete surface, which requires extreme effort and often means hiding imperfections, the architect intentionally preserves the rough texture.
They leave the raw marks of the creation process visible.
Exactly. They intentionally leave visible seams where the concrete forms met, they accept the slight cracks that naturally occur as the material settles, and most tellingly, they preserve the imprint of the wooden forms used to shape the concrete.
So instead of covering up the scaffolding marks, you celebrate them as part of the structure's story.
That visible roughness and irregularity adds depth and authenticity to the space. It tells a story of its creation, making the building feel more grounded, more lived in, and therefore more inviting, rather than sterile and cold. It's an explicit rejection of purely functional aesthetics.
The result is that the object, or the architectural space, carries the powerful presence of the human touch and material's natural state. It becomes a companion with a soul, not just an efficient shape.
And it's designed to evolve and acquire character with use and the passage of time, resisting the planned obsolescence of global consumer culture.
Ultimately, the security and the depth of this culture are mutually sustaining. The homogeneity of the society creates the control and social pressure necessary for the safety we saw in the opening anecdote.
And that deep cultural priority allows Japan to reject purely efficient economic models that would otherwise crush unique cultural values like the artisan spirit.
Yeah.
It is an internally consistent, self-reinforcing system.
So if we synthesize our core findings, Japan's legendary safety and order are not accidental, nor are they purely altruistic. They are the result of a powerful, internally consistent social machine built on profound homogeneity, pervasive collective surveillance, what we term the Panopticon of Peers, and an intense existential fear of social exclusion.
A fear enforced by the mechanism of shame.
Exactly. And economically, this unique social base allowed for a highly controlled, state-led development path. The translative adaptation in the ingredients approach that explicitly protected its cultural priorities, like the artisan spirit, from the forces of pure, immediate global efficiency.
The system delivers absolute predictability and security, the security that allows that businessman to sleep undisturbed on the street. But that absolute security is purchased at the high cost of intense psychological constraint and the systemic suppression of the individual's voice and expression.
This engineered society guarantees stability, predictability, and safety, making it one of the most structurally reliable nations on Earth.
It truly is.
In a world screaming for freedom, Japan whispers the comfort of constraints.